Princess Leia's ship was being pursued by Imperial fighters commanded by Darth Vader, who with his endless troops was firing lasers in a frantic attempt to bring Leia down. The princess was giving orders to her crew, who were trying their best to survive the merciless blasts. They were trying to reach hyperspace. But something went wrong as soon as the entire Tantive 4 began to shake strongly. A well-aimed shot hit the ship, causing the energy shields to fail. The ship's pilot says that the shield generator has been hit and that they need to send the droids to fix that hole immediately. R2D2 quickly moved to attach himself to the outer fuselage of the spaceship, using magnetic field technology to magnetize himself to the metal of the ship and avoid being thrown into outer space. In the midst of the incessant laser fire, the ship's pilot looked at his monitors lighting up again. The shield generator is back online. R2D2 is greeted with relief in the eyes of the crew and is congratulated by everyone. But he soon turns on the magnetic field technology because the pilot has activated hyperspace travel and everyone on the ship has suffered a great shaking that was preparing to jump. The crew had few seconds to think, as the tanks had been hit in the first attack and were now leaking. R2D2 tried his best to reach the hyperfuel tanks, which are part of the Tantive IV's hyperdrive. But in the midst of his attempts to seal the leaks, he was completely drenched in the substance. The pilot tried to stop the hyperspace jump, but the controls locked up and so a gigantic explosion occurred as the ship began the jump. With the explosion, unlike anything ever seen before, a high-intensity magnetic field formed as the spacecraft entered warp speed. Magnetic waves distorted the ship's surroundings. The space around the ship showed unique vibrations, caused by the mixture of the explosion, highly energized fluid, and the magnetic field technology used by the droid. Then a temporal rift opened up in space. Everyone was dragged through the rift, and somewhere far away, some faint beeps began. R2D2 had been damaged in the crash, but his energy systems managed to give the little droid enough strength to get back on its feet. He observed the twisted wreckage of the burning ship. He then searched for survivors, a mission without much success. R2D2 saw the bodies of the pilot and crew, but luckily managed to find Princess Leia still showing signs of life, albeit very slight. A small electric shock was enough to rouse her from her slumber. Leia felt pain all over her body and knew deep down in her soul that her end was near. She realized that her only option was to entrust one more mission to the little blue droid. In her final moments, Princess Leia instructed R2D2 to deliver the message directly to its destination, Obi-Wan Kenobi. After the chaos of explosions, temporal disturbances, and Princess Leia's death, R2D2 continued on until he finally reached the epicenter of the city planet and realized that he was in an ancient version of Coruscant. He found himself in the capital of the galaxy, but everything was different. Everything seemed to be at an earlier stage than he knew, where the Empire had not yet risen to power. He just knew that he had to find Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he headed through the busy streets in search of the Jedi Temple, the only place where Obi-Wan could be. Finally, when he found the Jedi Temple, with its large imposing doors and ancient structures, he didn't hesitate. Inside the temple, Obi-Wan Kenobi was at a meeting of the Jedi Council. The Masters were discussing a strange instability in the Force. Obi-Wan listened attentively, his gaze serious but focused on the discussion. As the Jedi spoke, a familiar presence made Obi-Wan turn towards the entrance to the hall. R2D2 entered, his lights flashing, and Obi-Wan, not understanding how the robot had gotten there, stood up and walked over to him, curious. "R2D2?" said Obi-Wan, approaching. The droid emitted a whistle, as if trying to communicate something. Soon, R2D2 projected a holograph of Leia, her image serious and distressed. "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You are my only hope." Leia's voice echoed through the room. All the Jedi Masters in the room were attentive, and Obi-Wan asked the little droid to continue with the rest of the message. He sensed that something big was about to happen. "General Kenobi, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now he begs for your help against the Empire. I regret that I cannot present my father's request in person, but my ship has been attacked and I fear that my mission to take you to Alderaan has failed. I have placed information vital to the survival of the rebellion in the memory systems of this R2 unit. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You are my only hope." Obi-Wan, with a grave look on his face, glanced at the other Jedi. I don't know what that means, but Leia's message is clear, and we need to understand how that's possible. Ki-Adi-Mundi looked suspicious, but Obi-Wan felt that message could be the key to understanding what was to come. Unexpected, but powerful. The message is, commented Master Yoda. He closed his eyes, feeling the Force in its fullness. By the way of the Force, follow we must. Who is this Leia? Asked Plo Koon, looking at the holographic projection with skepticism. We don't know her, but her words arouse concern. Obi-Wan shook his head, thinking about the implications. I don't know who she is, but the message was given with great urgency, and the Force tells me that we can't ignore this girl's words. Leia's holograph disappeared, but the word Empire echoed in everyone's mind like a warning. Empire, muttered Obi-Wan. He closed his eyes, trying to concentrate, and that's when his mind traveled to the future, to what could be the secret of that threat. He saw that the galaxy was on the brink of chaos, and he felt it with frightening clarity. Yoda watched intently. In the Force, the distortion I sense. Someone or something, the altering future is. Yoda's words were like a snap in Obi-Wan's mind, as if a hidden truth was finally being revealed. The Force was reacting, and he could feel a disturbing presence that he couldn't identify. Something had happened, something that had to be put right, or the galaxy would be lost forever. Obi-Wan stood up slowly and said, The future, I have a clear vision, he said with a faraway look in his eyes. The Empire, not just a threat, but a reality. The vision was vivid. The galaxy under the absolute control of the Empire, with entire planets subjugated and freedom stifled by tyranny. This is the future that Leia's message brings us, continued Obi-Wan. Ki-Adi-Mundi frowned. Have you had a vision, Obi-Wan? And how will we know if it's true? The future is always uncertain. Obi-Wan looked at Ki-Adi-Mundi, knowing that his master didn't doubt him, but was looking for information. I have seen the destruction of what we have built, the rise of an empire that rules with iron and fire. But what's missing is the connection. How did it come about? Who is responsible for this change in the future? R2D2 emitted a small whistle, attracting the attention of everyone in the room. Obi-Wan approached the little robot thoughtfully. While R2D2 was being carefully examined by the Jedi, Obi-Wan felt a growing pressure in his chest. The Force was stronger than ever, but also more confused. Obi-Wan took the little droid for an in-depth analysis, where he confirmed some suspicions and also discovered something hidden. He found something even more alarming. In R2D2's memory banks, among the data corrupted by the explosion and the temporal distortion, Obi-Wan managed to recover fragments of images that seemed to be from the distant future. He showed the images to the 5 masters present at the time: Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, and Anakin Skywalker, who had recently been placed on the council by order of Palpatine, but had not received the title of master. The hologram shook, with static interfering, but an imposing figure emerged from the shadows. Mechanical breathing echoed through the dark room as a being in black armor, immense and menacing, walked among the wreckage of a battle. His presence exuded pure terror, and a red lightsaber showed a menacing glow. Darth Vader, muttered Obi-Wan so that everyone could hear what he had discovered in the records. The name was unknown to the other Jedi present, but the mere mention of that figure made the Force vibrate intensely around them. That being, a Sith he is, said Yoda, his eyes squinted with deep concern. Greater danger than we have ever faced, he represents. Mace Windu leaned forward, his expression serious. If this is a vision of the future, then perhaps we can avoid this fate. We need to discover its origin. The existence of that being was proof that something in time was distorted. Leia's message was not just a plea for help, but a warning of a dark future. If the Empire she mentioned did not yet exist in that timeline, it meant that the Jedi still had a chance to prevent it from arising. A dangerous path it is, but necessary to investigate it becomes. The Jedi Council decided to act quickly. Mace Windu expressed his concerns, saying that if that Sith existed in the future, his origin must be in the present. Ki-Adi-Mundi reinforced the logic behind this thought, questioning which master could train such a powerful warrior on the dark side. Plo Koon added that the vision not only showed a Sith, but also evidenced the destruction of an entire political system, something the Jedi Council could never allow to happen. The discussion soon turned to who was responsible for the rise of this Darth Vader. The experienced Mace Windu observed that a coup against the Republic would require significant political power, someone with enough influence to manipulate the Senate and the Jedi at the same time. Yoda nodded in agreement, and this made the others stop to think about the people with the most power and influence throughout the Senate and the Republic. A few names were mentioned, but Ki-Adi-Mundi mentioned that, since the start of the Clone Wars, Palpatine had accumulated power to an alarming degree, remaining in office indefinitely. Since taking over as Chancellor, he has only escalated in power. With each crisis, the Senate granted him more authority, making him a central figure. The Jedi were always on the lookout for this imbalance, but never found any concrete evidence that he had ulterior motives. Obi-Wan reflected on his relationship with the Chancellor and admitted that he had always taken a keen interest in Anakin. Yoda, attentive to the direction of the conversation, warned of the dangers of absolute power and the dark paths it could take. Suspicion about Palpatine was beginning to grow, but not everyone was prepared to accept this possibility. Anakin reacted with indignation to the suggestion that Palpatine might be involved in something shady. With all due respect, Masters, Palpatine is a great leader. He has been essential to the Republic and has always shown loyalty to the Jedi. Mace Windu, however, stood his ground and questioned whether Anakin trusted the Chancellor more than the Order itself. The young Jedi felt the weight of the accusation and clenched his fists, lowering his head. I trust the Order, but I know that Palpatine has never treated me with distrust or disrespect. The atmosphere in the room became even more tense when Yoda warned that blind trust was dangerous. Dangerous trust, that is, power, a treacherous path it can be. Obi-Wan watched his former apprentice with concern, sensing in the Force that something inside Anakin was in conflict. To seek more answers, the Jedi decided to try to recover R2D2 damaged memory fragments. The little droid had gone through a temporal distortion, and its database suffered interference that the Masters called a Force echo. This phenomenon caused oscillations in the energy of the files, making recovery unstable and dangerous. Plo Koon analyzed the stored information and explained that some data blocks were automatically sealed to prevent complete degradation. We can try to unlock them, but there's a risk of losing everything in the process. They moved on. If there was anything else hidden in that memory, they needed to find out before it was too late. The Jedi Council waited anxiously, as any new detail could determine their next move against the invisible threat that loomed over them. After days of intense work, the Jedi Order's specialists managed to recover a new fragment of the damaged hologram, offering an even more disturbing vision of the future. R2D2's small projector flickered, emitting a fragmented image with static distorting the image that appeared on the screen. The central figure, dressed in formal attire, spoke in a persuasive, impersonal tone, his face still hidden. The content of the conversation, however, was clear. The war is almost won. The Jedi haven't noticed. My apprentice will soon be ready. The voice was familiar, but his face, distorted, did not allow immediate identification. Obi-Wan, looking closely at the recording, felt a chill as he realized the familiarity of the voice. That tone. It's someone I know, muttered Obi-Wan, his mind racing through all the possibilities. He looked at the other Jedi, whose expressions reflected the same unease. Who was responsible for those words and what did they mean? Mace Windu frowned and said, "If this is really from someone we recognize, then there is a much deeper connection between the Empire and the Sith than we imagined." Yoda remained silent for a moment, reflecting on the revelation. His eyes were half closed, absorbing the Force and feeling the unease that was growing inside him. Deep deception. The Force reveals, he said. The truth is difficult. Reveal itself, the light will one day. Obi-Wan asked, "Is it possible that this being is directly involved with the Sith? Or is it something more subtle? We don't know yet, but the words are clear," said Mace Windu, crossing his arms. The war is almost won. The apprentice's apprenticeship will soon be complete. This is no ordinary thing. Someone is plotting in the shadows, and we may have failed to notice the signs until now. Taking this into account, Master Plo Koon inclined his head slightly. And there is only one man in this war who has amassed so much power unopposed. The mention wasn't direct, but the name was already hanging in the air. Anakin felt his stomach turn and said, "That again!" His voice carried a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Palpatine didn't use that power against the Republic. He was elected by the Senate, and the war forced him to take exceptional measures. Measures he never undid, Ki-Adi-Mundi retorted. He promised to give up his war powers when the conflict was over, but will he? Anakin took a deep breath, trying to control his irritation. He never hid anything from me. He's always trusted me more than anyone here. If there was something wrong, I would know. Mace Windu stood his ground. Count Dooku was also a respected Jedi before he revealed himself as a Sith Lord. The fact that Palpatine is at the center of everything and remains untouched is suspicious, to say the least. Palpatine is not Dooku. Anakin's voice echoed around the room. He's always been an ally of the Jedi. He's never shown anything but loyalty to the Republic. You are desperate to find an enemy where none exists. Yoda raised his eyes to Anakin and said, "False certainties. Dangerous they are. They can blind us." Anakin looked away. Why were they so determined to condemn Palpatine? And why did he feel that he was somehow being placed in the middle of that suspicion? Plo Koon watched Anakin with unflappable calm. Or he has always been a patient enemy, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. The silence after his words was heavy, and Anakin, his eyes burning with anger, tried to rebut again. "That's a mistake. We can't make assumptions based on corrupted data fragments." Obi-Wan felt the tension between them growing by the moment. "Anakin, I understand how you feel, but we must consider all the possibilities. We can't ignore what we're seeing." Anakin, still shaken, tried to understand what was happening. Palpatine still seemed an indispensable leader, but Windu and Plo Koon's words were beginning to make sense. After months of clandestine investigation and careful observation of the cosmic forces, the Jedi began to put together the pieces of a great mystery, one that could alter the course of the galaxy forever, and it was all thanks to Master Yoda. Since the early days of Anakin Skywalker's training, Yoda had always had a peculiar distrust of the young man, and now, as a mature Jedi, the restlessness in his heart had grown alarmingly. It all started when Anakin was accepted onto the Jedi Council as a child. Even with his prowess and impressive power in the Force, Yoda couldn't shake the feeling that there was darkness in his future. Anakin, still very young, possessed an aura of fear and insecurity that, in the words of the Jedi Master, seemed too intense for someone of his potential. As Yoda warned, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hatred, and hatred leads to suffering. However, at the time, following his master's last living wish, Obi-Wan Kenobi trained Anakin Skywalker. Years later, when Emperor Palpatine began to be investigated more deeply, Yoda noticed something even more disturbing. Anakin's heated defenses, especially when they accused Palpatine of manipulating the Republic, brought to light something that Yoda could no longer ignore. Anakin's unwavering loyalty to the Chancellor didn't seem to be just about friendship or gratitude. It was something more, something deeper and darker, something that perhaps was at stake beyond simple politics. Yoda convinced Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi to help him in a secret investigation, an undercover surveillance of Anakin, especially because of his ties to Palpatine. The Jedi Master sensed that something was deeply wrong, but needed more proof to fully understand the situation. Together, the three Jedi put a plan into action to monitor the meetings between Anakin and Palpatine, in the hope that by seeing these interactions up close, the truth would finally be revealed. The chance to discover something fundamental came when the Jedi became aware of a secretly arranged meeting between Anakin and Palpatine. It was a silent night on Coruscant when Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Mace Windu watched from afar, using the Force to hide in the shadows. They positioned themselves in a building adjacent to Palpatine's office, fully aware that this might be their only opportunity to see the truth with their own eyes. Watching from the window, the Jedi observed the scene with growing tension. Anakin seemed comfortable, almost intimate, with the Chancellor. What followed was a dialogue that the Jedi never imagined they would hear. "Chancellor, everything I did to save Padme. You promised that you could show me the way to prevent her death." "I trust you," said Anakin, his voice trembling with a mixture of despair and confidence. Palpatine, as always, was smiling. It was a cold, calculated smile, the smile of a manipulator. Anakin's eyes reflected doubt. The pain of Padme's imminent loss was what drove him, but it was also what weakened him. He knew he was straying from Jedi principles, but deep down, Palpatine's promise was all he believed could guarantee his beloved's survival. "I will do whatever is necessary," he murmured. Palpatine leaned in slightly, as if teaching a disciple, and said with sinister calm, "Fear, Anakin, is what prevents you from reaching your full power, the fear of losing those you love. But remember, my apprentice, fear leads to hatred, and hatred leads to much greater things. What you must understand is that, to save Padme, it takes more than simple strength. It takes absolute power." The Masters watched everything with growing apprehension, even more attentive to the subtle details. As they watched the scene, it became clear that the relationship between Anakin and Palpatine had become much more than just a friendship. It was a connection deeply rooted in fear and the promise of absolute power. And so it was in the silence of that room that Palpatine, with venomous calm, revealed his game. "I saw the message from the future, Anakin. The one you stole for me. I saw your destiny. Your true destiny. You're not joining me just for power. You're joining because you're the chosen one. You always have been. The vision of the future. You will become Darth Vader, the one who will bring about the new empire. And that future, it is already mapped out." Anakin was paralyzed for a moment, his eyes wide, as if he were absorbing Palpatine's words. But the Chancellor continued, "There is no turning back for you, Anakin. What you have become can no longer be undone. Only with the Force on the dark side will you be able to save Padme. There will be no other way." And it was with these words that the truth finally revealed itself, like a crushing weight. Palpatine himself had manipulated everything to bring him to this moment. Anakin's future was not a choice. It was a sentence. He would be Darth Vader. At that moment, the three Jedi, who until then had remained silent, began to approach. "You would become this, we knew. No escape there was," said Yoda. Obi-Wan, with sadness visible in his eyes, added, "I've been against this since the day in the Senate. I didn't want to believe it, but there's no hope now, Anakin." Mace Windu firmly concluded, "Now, what's left for us is to stop what you're becoming, before it becomes too late." With those words, an unbearable tension formed in the air. Palpatine went from a surprised face that he tried to manipulate with lies and tell them they got it wrong to a malicious smile, and seeing that there was no convincing them otherwise, he struck his first blow. He was no longer just the Chancellor. He was a Sith Lord, Anakin's future master, and the future was now on his side. "Prepare yourselves, Jedi. The battle for the fate of the galaxy begins now." The fighting intensified at a frenetic pace, each movement executed with immeasurable precision and intensity. The glow of the lightsabers cut through the darkness, a deadly dance between good and evil. Palpatine was like a shadow, moving with a dark fluidity, his blows quick and calculated, the red blade a reflection of his own malice. Yoda, with the agility of a master, dodged and counterattacked, his quick little steps and floating green saber defying the brute strength of his opponent. "You're old, Yoda," Palpatine taunted as he spun his blade with ease, trying to destabilize the Jedi Master. "The new order doesn't need you anymore." Yoda dodged swiftly. "The Force at any age guides. Lose, you will go." Meanwhile, Mace Windu, with his imposing posture, unleashed powerful and precise attacks against the Sith Lord. But the Sith anticipated, counterattacking with a speed that defied all logic. Anakin and Obi-Wan, on the other hand, were fighting another battle. Obi-Wan was trying to anticipate Anakin's movements. But there was a tension, something Obi-Wan couldn't ignore. What the dark side could do to Anakin, and how much he could still save his friend. In a moment of intense concentration, Obi-Wan approached Anakin and launched a swift attack, but his former apprentice easily blocked it. And then that's when the wind of the fight changed. Anakin lunged forward, his blue lightsaber now vibrating with the weight of his inner conflict. "Don't make me do this, Anakin," Obi-Wan shouted, trying to guide his student. Anakin, with confused but angry eyes, said nothing. Fear and hatred had tried his soul, and all that remained was a fight for Padmé's survival, or what he believed to be a fight for her. The fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin was visceral, a clash between two great friends, now separated by the distance of the dark side. "I'm doing this for her," Anakin shouted, the weight of his decision stamped on his face. But the battle wasn't over yet. Palpatine, watching the chaos unfold, turned quickly. He was in control, everything was according to his plan, but Yoda and Mace Windu were unwilling to give in. They advanced against him with a ferocity that Palpatine had not expected, but their response was just as lethal. The fight was even for a moment, the lightsabers clashing with such force that sparks lit up every corner of the room. But in the midst of the battle, Yoda looked at Anakin with his wise old eyes, feeling the weight of his pupil's decision. "Anakin, choose you must. The dark side, against the light, the choice, yours it is." But the Jedi wasn't listening, and the conflict continued to take shape as the forces of light and darkness clashed with all their intensity. When the dust finally settled, the three Jedi were exhausted but still standing. Palpatine stood back, his expression as grim as ever, and Anakin, with his lightsaber out, stood alone in the center of the room, looking at his friends who were now his enemies. The fight was not over, but the fate of the galaxy was about to be decided. Palpatine then launched rays from his fingertips towards Mace Windu, who was saved by Master Yoda's control of the Force. The Jedi were no longer just reacting, they were coordinated. That's when Yoda launched himself at Palpatine. The little Jedi Master moved quickly, taking advantage of the Sith Lord's distraction to get closer. With a precise and unbeatable move, Yoda slid forward, using the Force to disarm Palpatine with one swift blow, knocking the red lightsaber out of his hands. The Sith, now disarmed, tried to react, but Yoda didn't give him time, leaping to the side and swiping his green blade quickly and accurately, cutting Palpatine's saber in half. The Supreme Chancellor, disoriented, stumbled backwards and begged for mercy. Mace Windu, taking advantage of the confusion, used the Force to deliver a devastating blow to Palpatine, knocking him to the ground and causing the Chancellor to humble himself and beg for mercy. The fallen, weakened and cunning Sith tried to fight back with another wave of lightning, but his energy was rapidly diminishing. This was clear from the accelerated and morbid aging his face showed. Nevertheless, the Sith used his rays to fire indiscriminately. Seeing the opportunity, Obi-Wan stepped forward deftly, his hands firmly on his lightsaber, and with a calculated and precise movement, he struck a final blow. The blue lightsaber cut with deadly clarity through Palpatine's torso. The Sith's body shook one last time before finally falling lifeless. Anakin was unable to act in time. He felt his master's presence removed from the galaxy, the weight of the decision he had yet to make crushing his soul. Yoda, his eyes heavy with wisdom, turned to Anakin. He knew what he had to do. With a swift and decisive movement, Mace Windu advanced towards Anakin, using the Force to momentarily immobilize him. Obi-Wan was the first to act, going after Anakin's lightsaber with a quick, calculated blow. He easily disarmed him, leaving him vulnerable. Yoda, his eyes deeply saddened, looked at the young man before approaching, touching Anakin's shoulder firmly. Obi-Wan, his eyes full of compassion, also approached, his eyes fixed on Anakin. "We have always been your masters, Anakin, but you must choose the path you will follow without the influence of the Sith. There is still time, my friend." With the lightsabers of the Jedi shining down on Anakin's immobilized figure, the battle that had lasted a lifetime inside him seemed to come to an end. The Force, both light and dark, now seemed to rest on his shoulders, awaiting his last choice. Anakin then bowed his head, saying, "I'm sorry." Ashamed, Anakin decided to withdraw from the Order, going with Padme to Naboo, at her request, where Luke and Leia were born. Once Luke was old enough to begin his training, Anakin returned and was accepted with Luke. Leia stayed on Naboo with her mother and years later was informed of her message from the future that changed the history of the galaxy.